Thanks. It's a real honor to be here. Not too much pressure, Zeke. Thanks a lot. Last time I spoke to you was probably about 7 years ago, and it was around meaningful use. I hope this is more meaningful to you. It's certainly probably going to be a little more exciting and a little closer to what you do on a daily basis. What I want to do is tee up and talk about artificial intelligence, and it's really germane to what we do. I'll try and convince you of that. It's really not a threat, and it's going to be very pervasive in our practices. We need minds like yours to think through how this is going to work from an economic standpoint, because I can tell you right now, the people that are creating it aren't thinking that way. So we really need to support that. And to that end, some of what we've done in the creation of this Data Science Institute is to house and support those kind of activities. So let me step into this and just level set the playing field to describe the technology, its impact on society, and then our future or how it applies to us. I'll just briefly mention in the technology, this is all under the rubric of data science. So you'll hear machine learning and deep learning and artificial intelligence. There's many, many tools inside of machine learning, and they have a lot of buzzwords. Artificial intelligence is probably, or artificial neural networks is probably the one that you'll hear of the most, and it seems to be the one that's most applicable to our field. And within that, there's a version of it that uses deep processing layers called deep learning. And that's defined as placing large amounts of data into multiple deep processing layers to achieve hierarchical understanding of concepts inherent within the data. Or said differently, it's just what we do every day. Humans do this. Computers to date have not been able to do this. So how do you get to that point? Well, when you do with a computer, it's called artificial intelligence. So that's really the term artificial intelligence. There's many different ways to make it. This one applies to us. So basically, you reverse engineer the human brain, or you use it as a model or framework. And that's what folks have been doing for the last 50 years. But in the last few, it's really changed things a lot, and I'll show you that later in the presentation. So to reverse engineer the human brain, you have to kind of understand the human brain. And we do from a conceptual and model standpoint. So inside the brain, there are these cortical columns, these 100 million pattern recognizers of about 100 neurons each. These are the things that are connected to the senses that will then look at something like a cat and dog and say, oh, it's a cat, it's a dog. It recognizes it. You can train them, and then you can actually recognize those objects. So if we wanted to recreate that artificially, you could look at the neurobiology, you could take it down to the biochemistry, but we don't have biochemistry labs in 2017 to be able to build these things up organically. So you go a layer deeper and look at the information theory. How are things moving around? How does the synapse able to remember and learn all of these aspects? And then you reconstruct that using electrical engineering, computer chips, graphical processing units, and then you use computer software. This particular example is a gradient descent algorithm. And when you do that, it simulates the action potential of a neuron. And so you do that once, and then you do that millions of times in software, and you've got a simulation of that cortical column. And now what you can do is put sensory input, like microphones for sound and cameras for vision, but you can do extrasensory too, things beyond human senses. You can look at tremendous amounts of data and analyze that as you would. So this computer can quote unquote see cats and dogs, and it's really the first time where this precept or this notion of a cat and dog in a human is essentially the same as a cat and dog inside of a computer. So that at the information theory layer, they share that same approach. So the impact that this has had is pretty tremendous. It's all started, as I said, really in the last 5 years or so. So if you look, 50 years ago, people were working on this, but it needed a lot of push, and that's what's happened recently. So what really kind of triggered everyone's thinking on this was when IBM used Watson to beat the then reigning champion of Jeopardy, Ken Jennings. And he lost by a factor of 3, so he really got tromped on. And at that point, he said, I, for one, welcome our new computer overlords, which was kind of telling as to what this could be. Pretty fateful. In 2013, Google created Google Brain with 16,000 CPUs, which simulates 1 billion synapses, $5 million inside of a computer, inside of a warehouse, a computer room. And that's about the strength, the neuronal strength of a honeybee brain. In 2014, Google and Microsoft algorithms recognized objects better than humans. Now, how can you claim that? Well, there's a competition called ImageNet that's been run every year since 2010, which has thousands of objects inside of millions of images. and everything from babies to banjos, all these kind of objects that are out there. Humans are accurate at about 95%, because, for example, it's not just recognizing a monkey, it's one of the 20 species of monkeys that are inside the system. So in 2010, people used the old-fashioned computer vision approach, and it's kind of like old CAD that we had in our systems, a decade ago or two. And the accuracies were pretty poor, 20 to 50, 70% accuracy. In 2011, they got a little better. But in 2012, someone said, why don't we try deep learning? And when they did, it hopped over 80. So obviously the next year, like good researchers, everybody used the thing that came in first the year before. And still near, almost close to in 13, human performance. And in 2014, finally, several companies actually rose above superhuman recognition of objects. 15, 16, and on, it just got more and more accurate. So just as an example, you can pull out your phone. Apple embedded one of these algorithms inside of their OS. So if you go to your screen for pictures, go to the application, you can just type in objects that you probably haven't even cataloged, but now they're able to be cataloged because it recognizes what's inside of those pictures. So in this case, this is my phone, I just typed in dogs. Ashamed to say I have 746 pictures of dogs. Talks to you about my personal life. I'm surprised to recognize some of them. I think the ones dressed up like a chicken for Halloween. But also more obscure things like mountains, right? So you type in sunsets, beaches, clouds, whatever, and it just does it. So if that doesn't spark in you, that if it's doing it on your phone and this is just local, what could it do inside of a system that's dedicated for the same kind of stuff in MRI, CT, et cetera, right? So in 2015, IBM also got that idea, and they acquired several companies, $5 billion worth of companies in that time frame, and one of them was Merge. Merge is a PACS risk company. Clearly, IT in our space spent about $1 billion for that company. The next year, 2016, just last year, NVIDIA, which is the big chip maker for GPUs for gaming, that's what really fueled a lot of this. So they announced the world's fastest GPU chip at 21 teraflops, and just to give you the equivalency, it's the same as that warehouse that Google had from 3 years before. This, they put into a package of 8 of them and sell it now as the world's first deep learning supercomputer. It sells for $129,000. After that, or right around that time, we at MGH, where I work, we partnered with NVIDIA and then created the Center for Clinical Data Science with MGH and BWH. So here's what it is that I think you need to do or consider doing at your organizations if you want to build this stuff. If you want to use it, you can just be a consumer and purchase. But if you want to build it, we had put in our EHR solution. It wasn't the best when we had it in, but now we look at this and say, we can make AI applications to enhance that product and inject those back into the care. So take the data out, create algorithms, and put that back in. And it's a little bit step through this process. We have to conceptualize what are the use cases? What do we want to do? What do we want to optimize? What do we want to be able to predict from the patient data? We have to then take all that data and curate it and then create a computational environment. And when you think about that, it goes back to that early slide I was talking about. It just takes data and works it through any of those number of those algorithms that exist and are getting created today by various compute companies, Google, Microsoft, IBM, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, etc. And so applied to our domain. When that happens, you're able to then run that through applications, and that application development can put it back into the clinical care environment. That could be a reporting system for radiology, a PACS system for radiology, it could be a modality inside of it, or it could be an EHR, et cetera. It depends on what the use case is. You need all the data to be able to do this optimally. So if you want to make an application in imaging, you don't just work on imaging data, just like we don't when we make diagnoses. You want all the data. So the goal is to collect all that data, and then you target your applications in specific domains, like diagnostics. You can also do it in clinical care management, therapy, population health, etc. The focus for us initially, fortunately, and that's probably why I was selected to be engaged with it, is diagnostics. But when you do this once, you can imagine you set up that framework, you can apply it to other areas as well. So in 2017, I'm proud to say that the American College of Radiology announced this Data Science Institute, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And why would we look at this? Hopefully you can see that this is really going to affect us, but how's heavy is it going to come at us? I just drew this out myself. I kind of mentally say, okay, I know the market capitalization of the companies that are in our space in healthcare IT. If you look at speech, it's in the sub 10 billion. EHRs are 10 to 30, 40 billion. Diagnostic companies are in that 100 billion range. But if you look at the top 5 manufacturers of artificial intelligence today, they collectively are $1 trillion market cap. So if they want to come at an industry, they're going to come at an industry and they're going to have force. And so we need to be able to guide them, to control that, to work with them, to manage the process by which they do it. We don't want another AI winner. We want it to succeed, but we also want to make sure that it's doing the right thing for patients. And even companies like GE, Siemens, Philips are also becoming, as you've watched the ads or if you listen to Jeff Immelt, they're coming from an industrial company into a digital company. So what's next? Does that just mean that these companies that are there are going to get bigger and bigger? Well, I don't really think so, and I'll show you why, and it applies to our field. So when you create artificial intelligence, you need big data, you need massive compute, you need powerful algorithms, and you need a broad investment. And that's what those companies are doing. But to really make a change in a domain, say healthcare, for example, you really have to have more things. You have to have domain expertise. I mean, we know what we do every day. We know how our operations work. And so within that, you need healthcare knowledge, healthcare environments, access to our facilities, vision of what healthcare of the future will look like, because those companies just really don't know that. You have to be able to make products, right? So you have to have clinical translation, application integration, and clinical commercialization, and then targeted investment, and now you got a chance to go out of field. Whether it's autonomous vehicles, it's search, it's marketing, it's tax prep, or healthcare. These are the other ingredients that you need. So the AI companies can do their part. Our perspective is an academic medical center that has the data and the use cases can do its part, but you also need these large healthcare companies, IT companies, to be able to do their part as well. And that's where I think you'll actually see, and other experts say, that that's where that growth, that really additional future is going to come from for additional growth in the industry. So our future, if you look at the literature, here's just a 5-year span of a search of the different applications, medical informatics, sensing, bioinformatics, imaging, all within healthcare. Imaging is the one that's growing the fastest from publication standpoint. And if that makes you encouraged or nervous, let me just have you listen to one of the experts, Jeff Hinton. He's like the father of deep learning. He's a Google scholar. He's been at this for about 40 years. He's well listened to. So in the time frame of RSNA, just this last one, he was presenting in Toronto, and they asked him, what do you think is the most exciting work to come? So it wasn't about healthcare or anything specifically. They just said, overall, what do you think? So if you guys can play that. Uh-oh. There we go.
Jeff, perhaps a similar question, if you may. What do you think is the most exciting work to come?
Okay, so, let me start by just saying a few things that seem obvious. I think if you work as a radiologist, you're like the coyote that's already over the edge of the cliff, but hasn't yet looked down, so doesn't realize there's no ground underneath him. People should stop training radiologists now. It's just completely obvious that within 5 years, deep learning is going to do better than radiologists, because it's going to be able to get a lot more experience. It might be 10 years, but we've got plenty of radiologists already. I said this at a hospital, and it didn't go down too well, but there you go. There's going to be...
Chills go down my spine every time I hear that. Okay, so is he right or wrong? And that's what I want to try and show you and let you decide. You heard what he said, or if you didn't, people should stop training radiologists now. It's just completely obvious that within 5 years, deep learning is going to do better than radiologists. It's kind of a damaging statement. And just to be in full disclosure, he actually did correct that statement a few months later in a Forbes article. But, things on the internet stay forever. So AI versus radiologists, this is what it looks like when you're doing this, right? So you have data and you have the results. That's coming from that expert. And you put both of those into this machine learning engine, for lack of a better term, and you wind up with artificial intelligence. And now that can see new data and in theory give results that are as accurate as that it got from the expert by watching the data and results that it created. So once you have that, The question is now, is it A versus B? Is that what we're talking about? Is that the question, radiologist versus this thing? And if you get deeper into this, you'll realize that's absolutely not the question. That has nothing to do with AI. Instead, it looks a little more like this. Data will go to AI, and some of that will go to the results, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but all of that will come to the radiologist, the expert, us. And when it does, we have more information to give, and actually less information that goes directly into the EHR, just what needs to. So if we're quantifying something, that could go directly into the EHR. But if we need to make decisions on diagnosis, more of that will come to us. And so I think the picture is going to look like this to the outsiders. They're going to say, all this is done in radiology. If we make sure this is done the right way, if it's just thrown into institutions in various places, it probably won't stick well. But if we look at it this way and we say, we'll embrace this, and this will actually provide more value to us and more value to our patients, this is an approach and a model that I think is one that works and is sustainable. Just to talk a little bit more about what that box would look like and how you do this, a physician, we're just going to take you through the standard workflow that you all know. A physician sees a patient, makes a decision, an exam gets performed, we visualize it, we detect something, we classify it into something, we report it out, and then there's a result, and then that process continues, right? So then the 90s happened and things got digital. So the exams got much more high-tech and digital. We visualized off of film. Instead of film, now we're on monitors. We use speech recognition. We have EHRs. We do decision support on the way in. We do decision support starting to with ACR Assist for us. But yet, through all that time, it's still human eyeballs making the detection, right? So people look at this area and think, okay, well, now that we can apply AI, let's focus it right in that one area. But there's many areas that you could apply AI. This is a general tool that you can make specific for certain areas. Not to say that this won't help in that area, and let's talk a little bit about that. But I think it'll be this combination that's used to improve that process. There are thousands and thousands of things that we do every day, the decisions that we make when we look at images. And if you split this space up, which is difficult for folks like Jeff Hinton to understand, without a background and understanding of this, there's all these different organ systems, obviously. There's all these different modalities that we work in. We've got different anatomical regions within those areas, and then we have findings within that. So this space is huge when you're trying to solve this problem. And let's just look at one, for example. Let's look at neuro and look at MR. And I want to show you this example because from an economic standpoint, this is something for you to think about. So if we look in that space and we say we're going to apply it to acute neurological symptoms. Someone comes into the ER, and now we have a 5-minute brain scan that we can do. And we just do 3 pulse sequences that find 3 different things. There's a radiologist making the findings. They do the neurological assessment, say that there's stroke, hemorrhage, mass, patient can go home, tertiary, take care of them, et cetera, and that's the results. So now, let's look at what you would do. You would create 3 algorithms there, one to look for acute stroke, one to look for acute hemorrhage, and one to look for mass lesions, all on those specific pulse sequences, right? So that means that you need tons of data. It's anonymized. You need to be able to then annotate that ground truth. Someone, probably a radiologist, has to go out and say, here's the strokes, here's the hemorrhages, here's the mass lesions, because things today are still supervised, so it needs the expert to be able to tell the software where the lesions are. And then there's normals. And then typically what people do is they run contests to say who can do this, who can solve the problem across the world. You would take that information back. You'd say who won. And then let's say you have those 3 algorithms. Now you could put them back into practice. So you can drop those in at the time that the radiologist is looking at that to assist them, or you could actually replace the eyeballs of the radiologist at that point, or you could do it differently and say, let's the structure, the numbers come out, and let the radiologist then make distinctions and differentials and include all of this information in. But you could change the workflow, you could change the CPT code, you could change a number of different things, and those are all potentially things that could happen. But to suffice it to say, when you're looking at this, this is just one area inside this giant map that we have to work through. So it's going to take quite a bit of time. The other thing to think about, though, is we see patients when they're symptomatic. That's a lot of when diagnostic and detections, with the exception of screening, that's when it takes place. The other way to think through AI is to be able to think, can I improve the outcome by doing that detection process earlier? But then you'd have to know who to do it on. So if you look at a population, clearly, we do diagnostic to separate diagnostic diseases from normals, then we go into biopsies to go further, and then all the way to therapy. And we do this with the least invasive approach we can, so imaging, then pathology, then therapeutics. And the earlier you do this, you get a better outcome in general. And so could you back this up? And could you use AI for these type things? So clearly we do imaging screening, but could you go back and actually use biosensors for monitoring? You use AI to watch devices like this, and then even further be able to look at predisposition from genomics and genetics using that as well. So this is all kind of a broad approach to take a look at the utilization of these components. And this opens up the thought of what is ground truth? Where is the disease at? Who has the disease? When are they going to get it? If they do get it, do they have it now? Do I count that? And so this is a challenge for what's going on today with deep learning. Here's the actual ground truth of a disease, let's say. The people in red have the disease. So you create a test, and you can only detect so many of those people that have the disease. So that's the test's ground truth. Humans can only detect with a certain accuracy those, and so that's that human ground truth. Now when you create the algorithms, it's only going to be able to be as accurate at whatever is used as ground truth. So if humans are, it's not going to get more accurate than the humans. Unless you say, okay, let's look at actual ground truth of who has the disease and who doesn't. And now from there I can be more accurate than the human, but still not more accurate than the test ground truth itself. Right? So you're still limited by that test. However, what if we created a new test that had higher accuracy, but humans were terrible at using it to be able to detect? It's a little, I think, of like, I didn't talk to Jeff Emmelt afterwards, but like when he was talking about detecting breech pregnancies, right? Instead of putting up this big expensive system, could you have a red light, green light to say yes or no? Maybe you could do that in AI, but maybe the data is too complex for a human to understand, unless you make it down to that red and green. But AI could be more accurate. So we also have to think about, are there different tests we can do to create, to take advantage of AI, different than just trying to use our own exams that we currently have optimized for humans? And we use this for different areas as well. AI will certainly have a role inside of modalities themselves. People are already doing this and will continue to do so. From visualization standpoint, here's just an example of a product that I asked Philips if I could show. They have the notion of an intelligent cursor, so when you're at your workstation, you can move the cursor around, and it's smart enough to say, oh, you're over the liver, and so here's some stats coming out of the EHR from the liver. Move it over to different areas. It can show you priors, all that kind of stuff. So all this is coming in different ways. We could clearly use classification to make our system smarter. You could imagine your speech recognition system is now acting more like Siri, so you could start to ask it questions instead of just dictation. And even inside the results in the EHR, you could imagine these things can get pumped back into a quantified way inside of your report. So if you order something specifically and say, I want the measurement of some object inside of the brain for an MR, you could get the data back, and it would be a specific, kind of like a blood value, be drawn out inside the EHR. So instead of just getting images and reports, I can get this information as well. And so the thought of that is that we're taking all that incredible work that we've been doing to improve the visualization that still kind of falls short of precision medicine with needing biomarkers and those things, but with AI it can kind of step us into that precision medicine realm. So just summarize real quick, I look at the Hinton challenge as to say he really understands compute. One of the best people in the world that really understands this space from a computational standpoint. But I don't think he has a broad understanding of the data that's required to do this inside of healthcare, as well as the thousands of use cases that we'll have to put forth to solve this problem in a broad sense, the massive efforts around implementation that companies will have to do, regulatory. I mean, I don't think Jeff probably thought about all of the regulatory FDA issues with this. And then validation, which is a key role that we're going to play at the Institute. Economics, that's your bag, and really need to think through how does this play? What's the right way to do all of this? Standards need to be created, education of those that are using it, commercialization processes, all the legal issues, the ethical issues. So this is a highly complicated area. And as you talk to people in detail, no one disagrees with this. And that's really the focus of where the Data Science Institute is going to be. In all of those domains, trying to help to move this in the right direction. So just in summary, I mean, this is pretty clear. Mark Twain said it. I mean, plan for the future. And that's exactly what we're doing. This is a highly dynamic space. We're going to have to be very agile and be able to pivot. But I see this as a very bright addition to what it is that we do. Thank you very much.